You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 312.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? I'm sitting here sort of laughing to myself because I have recorded this introduction now about 4 or 5 times because my cat Virgil keeps jumping up on the table and interrupting me. You know, it's funny. He's always typically like laying on the floor, like near where I'm working. And when I'm not talking, he's like just laying there sleeping. But the minute I start talking, even though I'm not really talking to anybody, I'm just talking into a microphone, he like wakes up and thinks he has to come in and I guess join the conversation. So I hope that this time I can make it through this without having him interrupt me. So first of all, welcome everybody. Welcome to all you new listeners and those who have been faithful and loyal to the show. I'm so happy that you're here. Whether you're here to learn about cookbooks you can read, learn about cookbooks you want to write, learn about cookbooks that you want to collect or add to your collection, or find a book for your cookbook club, you are in the right place. Before we get started with our interview today with Yasmin Fahr, I do want to let you know that our next cohort of cookbooks on KDP is starting in early September. So if you have a collection of family recipes, or if you have a food blog with recipes and photos, or if you have customers or clients that are requesting recipes from you, I would highly recommend that you think about joining this program. This is a group coaching program that I teach for any recipe writer, developer, or collector who wants to publish their recipes and stories in a book. In this program, I teach how to use Canva and Kindle Direct Publishing to publish your cookbooks. But what's different about this program is live, and I teach you step by step and walk with you through the complete formatting and uploading of your book so that our goal for this cohort is to have a finished book before Christmas. I'm tempted to almost call this Jingle Books, to have these books ready to go before the holidays. So stop and think about that. You could give this book as a gift for family, friends, clients, and customers for Christmas. I think it'd be a beautiful gift, of course. And in next week's episode, if you need to hear from some people who have successfully done this through the program I teach, we're going to feature some interviews with them so you can hear all about why they published their book and their tips and tricks for success with the program. If you want to get on the wait list, go to www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/KDP and you can get your name on the list so that you're sure to receive the emails when the doors for the program open. Again, we're starting in early September, and I don't want you to miss enrolling if this is something that you want to do in 2024. So head on over again to www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/KDP and get on the wait list. So for today's interview, again, like I mentioned, I have an interview with Yasmin Fahr. Yasmin is a recipe contributor to New York Times Cooking, Food 52, and The Kitchn. And she is the author of 3 cookbooks. Her newest cookbook, Cook Simply, Live Fully, is her ode to flexible, flavorful recipes for any mood. During our interview today, Yasmin shares her philosophy and recipes for cooking and feeding ourselves through the inevitable ups and downs of real life. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Yasmin Fahr. Hi, Yasmin. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so excited that you're here and love your beautiful new book, Cook Simply, Live Fully. And before we talk all about your book, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a food writer. I'm a recipe contributor to New York Times Cooking, and I've written three cookbooks. So this is my third book. My first was Keeping It Simple, which was based off of a recipe column I had for Serious Eats. And the second one was called Boards and Spreads, which, they're all a little bit different. That one's more for when you're having people over. And the first one was all one pot meals. And I know we'll talk more about this book later, so I won't say too much about that. But you can find my recipes in writing in the Kitchn or on the Kitchn, Guardian, Washington Post, Food 52. Yeah, so I've been very lucky to have a wonderful career in food. So you
Yeah.
guys are having me. Yeah, I know we'll chat all about it.
Yeah, it's great. I was reading one of I think it was a passage in your cookbook talking about, I think it was your cookbook or maybe it was your Facebook page. I
Yeah.
can't remember whether you were talking about the New York Times recipes where you develop for the New York Times app. And by the way, if people don't have that, it's a wonderful app to get
Yes.
recipe ideas. And I can't say there's ever been anything on there that I've cooked that's been a flop. It's always some kind of creative ways to use ingredients. But you said to the readers, I love to read your comments. And isn't that the
I
truth
do.
about the New York Times recipes? Sometimes there's like 500 comments.
So many. And I love it because the cooks are so passionate and they care, you know? So when you're
Yes.
on there, it's like, oh, yes, these are people who are really taking these words to heart and the recipes. And sometimes their ideas are also so good where I was like, oh, I haven't thought of that. So yeah, I really enjoy reading them. It's
Yeah,
very
I
fun.
think it is fun, very fun to do. So yeah, we're going to talk about your book, Cook Simply, Live Fully. But why don't we get started first of all with taking your career from food writing and just like the big picture, what made you take this into the cookbook space, your first book and now your third book? What was it about a book that you wanted to communicate to people?
So I've always loved cookbooks. I mean, that's how I learned to cook is through books. So it's just reading them. I mean, you learn so much about the author, their way of living, life, culture. And so I've always, loved books in general and especially cookbooks. So I think for me, it was just such a wowing experience to be able to do one. And it was, like I mentioned earlier, it was based off of this column I had for Serious Eat. So I used a few of those recipes and then I got to continue to develop more. And I think with books, you're really able to use your own voice more than you are with certain publications. And I know Substack and newsletters give you that space as well, but kind of before that, it was the first time I was really allowed to like let my personality shine through a bit. So it felt like a really nice way to connect with readers and have them get to know me as well. It wasn't just the recipe. It was like, oh, I'm a person also, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Did you have an agent for your book or did you go straight to
I
publisher?
didn't. No, so mine was actually both of my first two books were a bit unusual. So I didn't have an agent. I had a good friend that I used to work with about almost 12, 15 years ago. And she moved from the web to cookbook publishing.
Yeah.
And so she approached me and was asking if I wanted to do a cookbook based off of this column. And so, of course, I said yes. I was like, wait, wow, like I would love to do that. So I really kind of dove in without an agent. And then for the second one, I did find an agent. And then I ended up switching agents for my third one. So every book has been a bit
Yeah.
unique, which maybe is a process for everyone. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I
For me,
think so. I think so. It depends on the topic and depends on what you're writing about. And people in publishing do move around, so you kind of have to like work with that also. But this book you say is a book for real life, the ups
yeah.
and downs of real life. So tell us what you mean by that and how you came up with the concept for this book.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people say it's for real life. And I guess what I mean by that is that I don't think life is going to be this like steady, stable, predictable thing. And I think from my own experience, I've learned that it's really a roller coaster and even every day, every month, every year. And so I think with this book, I was really trying to capture these different moods and energy levels that I find myself having. Like when I'm super exhausted, I don't want to cook a thing, even though I love cooking. To days when I'm like, oh my God, I have so much energy. Like people come over, let me cook. And also, a lot of times when I decide what to eat, it's by how much energy or how I want to feel after I eat. So it's like, do I want something warming? Do I want something cooling? Do I want something cozy and nourishing? So I also attempted to kind of put that in the book. So, and I think that is how a lot of people think about eating and cooking. It's more intuitive than it is just here's chicken, here's fish, here's appetizers. It's more of like, how do I feel? What do I want? Because food is so it's what we eat to survive, but also it's so much more than that,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
trying to capture it all in one book. I mean, obviously I can't capture all of that in one book.
Yeah, but you did a really good job because you actually set the book up
yeah.
looking at mood and looking at energy level and
Mhm.
using the table of contents to connect to that. So tell us about the table of contents for the book.
Yeah, so based off of this theme, the first chapter is called Lap Dinner. So it's when you're super tired, there's no prep work, you're just like ripping, tearing things, and it comes together in 15, 20 minutes. And the idea is you're probably eating it in a bowl on your lap, maybe watching some TV with a glass of wine. The second chapter is at the coffee table dinners, where it's a little more casual, more your average weeknight meal, and you're probably sitting, at the coffee table. And then last one is at the dinner table. So it's a more traditional, dinner where you might have placemats and it's a little more time, but nothing is too involved. Like no recipe in my book is more than an hour and a half at the most, but this one might have you marinating something or using a couple of bowls instead of a kind of a one pot thing. So yeah.
And you also talk about, and you have different charts for wine. You
Yeah.
talk about the vegetable and the mighty vegetable. You
Yes.
talk about seasoning your food. Tell us a little bit about these. I think they're like little bonus sections in
Thank
addition
you.
to the
Yeah.
recipes, right?
I get really excited by them because I think they're actually maybe my favorite parts because, okay, so the mighty vegetable is a cooking chart. So it's kind of like a cheat sheet is how I think of it. So every recipe in the book for the oven is cooked at 400 degrees. So with this chart, you can learn how to swap ingredients depending on the season or whatever you have on hand, because everything will cook at the same temperature. But also, we give skillet instructions, prepping instructions. So you can basically look at it as a cheat sheet of like, how do I cook carrots? How do I cook bok choy? How do I cook, broccoli, broccolini? And you'll have these like little cheat sheets. And there's also a seasoning chart to kind of give you some different spice ideas, like or compound butter. So that way, if you are feeling in a rut, you can have some fresh ideas and perspective, which I find happens to me all the time. So, and then lastly, there is a wine pairing chart, which a friend of mine who's a sommelier wrote for us. So I basically took the dominant flavor profiles in the book, like the major ingredients, and then she matched them with the wine pairing. So all the recipe titles are written with the kind of like dominant ingredients there. So it's like miso or chicken or spices, and then you can look it up, and then she'll give you kind of like tips for what to say to your wine vendor or to type in online so you can have a description of what to look for. And it's kind of an easy way for you to understand how wine pairings work and figure out what you like, what you don't like, and just trying to take the pretentiousness out of it, which I think can happen with wine sometimes.
Yeah, and I love that you connected it actually specifically to things that are in this
Oh,
book.
yeah, only. Yeah.
Right, because sometimes charts that are in cookbooks don't even really connect to the recipes. They don't connect to the book. It's like a discussion about wine, but I love that you actually connected it to the things here.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the 400-degree oven. Fascinating. Because that people don't have to remember like what they're going to set their oven at.
I agree. And then also if you're like, oh, I wanted to cook broccolini or carrots, then you're like, but if it's at 400 or 425 or 450 or 350, then it gets so confusing. So I just wanted to make it really simple, really easy. And then also, let's say you're cooking a sheet pan like chicken, you can throw in another sheet pan of broccoli, broccolini, carrots, or whatever you want. And then it can cook at the same, or you'll know how long it'll take. So you don't have to worry about timing things. I think that's what I meant also by real life, because you don't think too much.
Right. Right. Because otherwise you're like, oh, the chicken's got to go in at 425 for X number of minutes. And this recipe for the vegetables says 375. And how do I work it all out? Right.
Right. Like what size do I cut it? Should it be in coins? Should it be in 2 pieces? Yeah. It's like, oh, let's make it all super simple for everyone.
Yeah. So, very nice. And so you do use the broiler. You obviously use the oven, you use the sheet pan. Any other techniques or styles of cooking that you talk about, maybe even in the at the dinner table section where it's 30 to 90-minute recipes?
Yeah, this one I talk a lot about chicken just in general, of like tips for roasting chicken and different ways of roasting it and cooking it, and how to buy it, how to make sure you get crispy skin. There's also a little section on polenta. So like throughout the book, like you were saying, you'll find kind of these little one-page notes about the broiler, like tips on how to use that, how to do sort of those like and salt and seasonings. I know that's a big question to people. Like, what does to taste mean? What is when you say season with salt? How much do you mean? So there's little caveats and timeouts from the recipes to kind of talk about this if you want to break from flipping through, if you have some time.
Yeah. And one of the chapters in the at the dinner table, the 30 to 90-minute recipes is big bowl salads and medium sides. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think these can stand, on their own, but particularly for at the dinner table, if you want to make a larger spread for more people, this is really meant to help you bulk that up. So there are like the big bowl salads, which I just love. And they're also done seasonally as well. And then a bunch of sides that you can make again seasonally that are easy to eat and will kind of complement the other flavors in the book. And during that chapter as well, I give some ideas of like, oh, this would go well with this recipe or that recipe. So that way you're not left in the dark of, what go with what as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. One of the recipes caught my attention, the lime ginger roasted radishes. Tell us about roasting radishes.
Yeah, so I love them because they retain their pink color and they lose that kind of sharp edge to them, and they taste more like potatoes. So they're really mild and they're really light. So I find them great for like summer days when it's super hot, but you want something refreshing and crunchy. And the lime and ginger here work really well together because it's bright and acidic, but also a little bit zippy. And it also looks beautiful with the green and the pink. So it's really nice. So it goes well with this roasted fish dish that has some dill on it and limes as well at the dinner table section.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a very unique way to, people, we think radishes, just like slice them up and put
Mhm.
them in a salad, but it's
It's
so fun to see when a vegetable like that is used in a different way. And
exactly.
I think that
And you don't
there's,
want to eat it all. Yeah.
yeah, right, right.
So
And that it
it's sick of it. I'm
actually
like,
changes the way it tastes. It's not as
it
sharp.
does.
Yeah,
Exactly. It doesn't have that peppery bite. So it is really nice to tone it down a bit.
yeah, very good.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about mood and balance, and we're talking about energy levels and cooking, but there's also has to be energy levels and mood related to writing cookbooks, right? And writing
Yeah.
recipes and like your work life. Do you have any things that you do, routines or rituals that you abide by that really help you to do your best work when it comes to your writing and your recipe development?
Absolutely. Like I find that I really need to be in a calm, like quiet place in my mind. Like when I'm really busy or feeling stressed, I'm not doing my best creative work. And sometimes you have to work through it. But for me, I find that I really need to make sure that I'm calm. So I meditate in the mornings every day for about an hour or so. And then for my process for recipes, I usually will write out how I think it's going to go. And then I'll go for a walk and then I'll think about it. And if there's some part that I can't quite figure out, like even today I was developing a recipe and I had lemon juice in the dressing, but in my head I was like, this is not quite right, but I couldn't figure out what about the recipe didn't work. And then halfway through my walk I was like, orange juice, like no lemon juice, orange juice. And it completely worked, but it was one of these small things that I couldn't quite figure out. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. I was like, why isn't this working? Like, what do I need to change? And it was like a little bit less acidity, a little bit sweeter.
Hmm.
So walking really helps me. And then I'll try the recipe and then again, kind of make notes to myself and try it again. And so that is a process as well. But I do find writing it out first helps me sort of think in my brain of what I want to do
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then get into a quiet place, which is hard.
Yeah. How much are you doing recipe development, like on a weekly or monthly basis for the outlets that you're writing for?
It's usually by season. So it's like every 2 months, I'll work on a new batch for the next season. But like during that time, I'm also pitching an idea. So it's sort of like an ebb and flow of like sending ideas out, getting assignments, working on them, and then doing that all over again.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you're
yeah.
actually creating and pitching the ideas before the season actually
Yes,
comes so that they can
exactly.
publish it during the season. What's it like to do that kind of work? What kind of mindset do you have to be in to pretend that you're in the fall when it's the middle
It
of
is.
summer?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes like winter, spring, fall, I find a bit easier, but when you're in the heat, like the thick of summer and it's 90 degrees and humid, it's so hard to think of like warming winter recipes. Like that's the last thing I want to eat. And that's also what I'm developing right now are these like winter stews and roasted things. And meanwhile, it's over 90 degrees here. And so it's difficult in a way, but it is really nice. It's like, yeah. I mean, I feel very lucky to do what I do, even if there are these weird bits to it.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And you then, when you cook and develop, you feed yourself the food that you're actually cooking and developing.
Oh, definitely. I
Yeah.
eat it. I usually make every recipe twice at least. So I have like a list of neighbors and friends. And I'm like, okay, do you want this? Do you want this? Will you try it? And so yeah, I definitely have to hand out the food because I'm always usually cooking for 4 or sometimes 6 to 8 if it's holiday season.
Yes.
So especially when I'm writing a book, there's just so much food and I hate it going to waste. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of people well fed around me.
Yeah. I noticed one of the things that you do to keep in touch with your readers outside of your work at the New York Times or any other outlet is you have a Substack newsletter. Can you tell our audience a little bit about Substack if they don't know about it and what that has done for your work as a food writer?
Yeah, so Substack and I think there's other newsletter options as well, but they have become really popular the past few years because it's a great way for writers to connect with their readers and to not in a way be limited by a publication or outlet's voice. So a lot of times when you're writing for any publication, you need to write in their voice, more often than none and kind of tailor it to their audience. And then here you really have the freedom to write whatever you want about whatever you want. And I think also as rates have gone down for media kind of across the board, it's been a great way for writers to get another source of income. So they're able to do their work and then also have a subscription model where people can, kind of invest in them, sort of like a CSA, if you will, where it's like you're, spending money on a farm ahead of time to kind of support their work. And it's in a sort of similar in a way. So it's been really fun for me. It's been great to connect with readers who comment, and I can share things about my life and work that I don't really have a space to otherwise. And I think, social media is also changing a lot, and the algorithm gets so difficult. So I think this is just feels like a wonderful way to connect in an honest, real way with people. And they don't have to be there if they don't want to, which is what's really nice about it as well.
Yeah.
So it becomes a good community.
Yeah.
I'm like podcast as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a great way to practice writing. Like if you're kind of starting out and you're trying to develop your voice, a place like Substack where you can start a newsletter, create this content on a consistent basis, you really can develop who you want to be online in terms of the things you want to talk about. If you don't want to talk about all your life, okay, what do I want to talk about? Like, what angle am I going to take? It's really a great place to work that out. So I highly recommend it, in particular if people don't have a newsletter that's already going connected to their website. Substack is definitely an option. And
it's very easy to use. Like they make it very user friendly and they have great support. So it's definitely a good place to start. Yeah. I think it's almost like blogs when they started, 15, 20 years ago? I don't remember, but it's sort of the newer version of that as a way to, like you said, use your voice, explore it, or topics you want to talk about, and you'll figure out a lot in that process.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. You've mentioned a few times, sometimes we want to maybe expand on something a little bit more, or we want to talk about something. But if we're writing for a certain outlet, we don't always have the opportunity to do that. And something like a cookbook or Substack does allow you the space and the freedom to let those parts of you come through and shine.
Yeah. And I think especially when you want to connect with a community, it's a really nice way to show more of yourself. And make it who you are and not just your work. I guess your work is a reflection of you at the end of the day, but it is nice to see it all come together.
Yeah. So you mentioned your meditation and your routine rituals for how you do your recipe development, the fact that you take walks. Any other advice for anyone who's trying to do more food writing or get into cookbook writing?
Yes, I would definitely, as we're saying, I would find your voice because I think especially now there is a lot of content. There's a lot of writing. There's a lot of recipes, wherever you're looking. And I think finding something that is true to you and I don't really enjoy the word authentic, but is real. And, and it's something that only you could make because it's something you love so much and you care about and comes from your point of view. I think people really connect with that because I think otherwise it becomes more repetitive, people doing what everyone else is doing, and it's hard to differentiate. And so I think it's really important to find your voice, what you care about, and then your work will reflect that. And I think that's what people will connect most with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things you went through in your life was feeling like there were a lot of things that were on your plate that weren't necessarily bringing you joy.
Yeah.
And you actually made a big change related to that. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about if you want to share what happened or what happened as a result of that? Yeah.
Yeah, you could say I had a mini life breakdown. Like I had a mini midlife crisis. I was 38 and I just finished, my second book, and it was a post-pandemic winter, and I think I was just working way too much, like 6, 7 days a week, and I'd really extended myself. And then I was going out too much and there was no balance in my life and I was just running on empty. And so I basically had a little breakdown and I started crying to my sister. And I was like, I can't do this. I need to quit my work. Like, I need a new career. And she was like, baby, you need some perspective. And so I ended up booking a trip to Menorca, this small Spanish island that had been on my mind for a couple of years. And, for many different reasons, I never got there. And when I got there, I mean, there's no other way to say it, but I fell in love with it. I just, felt a connection with this island. And I felt like I could see clearly for the first time, like how unhappy I was and how happy I could be. And obviously a lot of things had to change. It was not just like I moved and my life was better. It's not, and it's still work and it's still life. But yeah, I ended up moving out of New York City and I didn't have a home for a little while because of many other random things. But I ended up coming to Menorca for about 7 weeks on what ended up being a solo writing retreat and started working on this book. So a lot of it is really infused with this energy of like exploration and adventure, and also trying to figure out, how do I want to live my life? And I think that's where the mood and energy level came in. And now I moved here permanently, which is kind of full circle and a bit crazy, but I moved here in the beginning of March. And yeah, I am very happy. I mean, it's still not perfect. I don't want to say that,
Yeah,
but
because I think, like you said, even like this book for real life, there's always ups and downs, no matter
yeah,
where we are and no
exactly.
matter what we're doing. But
Right.
there's a couple things I think that you mentioned that I love that the island allowed you to experience that I do think that we can experience in our everyday lives if we're really intentional about it. And that's, first of all, you talked about quieting down
Yeah.
and creating intentional time for quiet.
Yeah, no, and exactly. And it's been such a blessing because I think
Yeah.
here things move at a slower pace. Like there's a siesta is real. Like things shut down at 1:32 and they open up 5:36. And so I can't go shopping. I can't do anything. And it becomes a time where I really sit, I eat lunch, I relax, I take a nap, I go for a walk or a swim. And I think it is carving out this time of rest. It really makes me more creative and I think just better in general because I'm actually able to think more and reflect and act intentionally rather than just rushing through life and pushing and kind of feeling like, whoa, where did the whole day go? What did I do? And I just feel kind of panicky and hectic at the end.
Yeah.
So, and it is taking time to unlearn like many years
Yeah.
of behaving this way. But
Yeah, and the
when
people may be listening and think, "Oh, well, that's great, good that
right
you,"
here,
I live in Northern Kentucky, and I still think that we can carve out time for
yeah,
quiet if we're intentional about it, no matter where we are, because the
I,
world is noisy,
yep,
with our phones, with, commuting if you commute, podcasts, we're recording a podcast, but still it can be noise if you don't take time away from it. The news, everything can just be noise. And even consuming information on our phones or laptops or
yeah,
whatever can be visual noise. It can be noise in our brain. So I personally think that having a time of the day where you can take about an hour for yourself. It doesn't matter what time of the day. As you
yep.
talk about the siesta time, I tend to do it earlier in the morning before the rest of the house wakes up. I've done this for a long time, and I think that when you can set that intention to quiet down, I mean, it's everything.
No, it
Uh,
changes. Yeah, no, and I think you're right. Like a lot of things I try and do as well is to go for a walk without my phone. Because even if I have
exactly.
it, I might open Instagram, I might
Right.
check my messages, and then I'm walking and texting and I'm not paying attention. So even that, or like turning my phone off at 9 p.m. and then
Mhm.
not opening it until after I've had coffee, after I've sort of started my day,
Right.
not it being the first thing I look at and checking messages and checking Instagram, which sometimes I do, and I can feel the difference
Yes.
in the day, and it's so easy to do it, which is the problem. But
Right.
making that extra bit of effort to
Right.
create that space to yourself,
Right.
100%.
Another thing that you said made a difference was being outside and being
Yeah.
in nature and enjoying the outdoors more. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I find that I think even for walking, when I can walk without music, without something, listening to podcasts, just actually with my own thoughts and in nature, it's much more restful. So a lot of times in New York, I would walk with headphones, listening to music, but it was kind of just like rushing through everything and I wasn't really reflecting. But I do think like I walk barefoot a lot in nature, just having like my feet on the ground or sitting like next to a tree, which I know sounds so new agey, but I do think there's something about it. Like you like breathing that air, like seeing the water or any of it, like it really calms me. And I just feel like there is like a bigger connection, you know?
Yeah,
I
no,
don't know how to
100%. Yeah.
explain
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
mentioned too that, before you made this change, I loved what you said. You were eating and drinking, going through the motions,
Yeah.
feeling empty and unfulfilled. Where if we really stop and think about it, you're still doing a lot of cooking and you're still
Yeah.
doing a lot of recipe development. So you're still obviously eating, but I bet that
Yeah.
what you're eating maybe if we've I often say you can use your cookbook concepts and what you write about to really maybe even transform what you're eating to a different space if you need to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I'm cooking just as much, working just as much, but then I think I'm enjoying it more because it is more intentional. And I think
Yeah.
the way I'm eating as well is much more seasonally. Like I shop at the market here and it's just a natural way. Whereas I feel like in the States, I was really going out of my way to shop seasonally. But
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a work in progress. It's
Yeah.
still hard no matter
Yeah.
where, what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that your book though, Cook Simply, Live Fully, I wanted people to know like what you were heading in, the change that had
Yeah.
happened before you headed into this book, and that you're really your hope is that people really can embrace this way of thinking about cooking and food in the midst of everyday life, which is full of ups and downs no matter where you live.
Exactly. And it's like my life is not perfect now that I live on this island. Like I don't
Right.
want anyone to think that like,
Right.
oh, I have it figured out, you know. And there are still days when I'm too tired to cook, but I think that is real life. You know, it's going to always be ups and downs, but I like you were saying, I think creating this intention to shop, eat this way, cook this way, even take a moment to think about what does my body need? What do I actually feel like eating and not just grabbing the first thing you see, which I've done as well, you know, but I think even taking that moment to think and create that intention of eating what's right for you, what you need, really can make a difference.
Mhm.
These small things can make a huge difference.
Yeah. I want to talk about one of the recipes that's in the chapter on lap dinners.
Okay.
And it's sheet pan asparagus with tomatoes, eggs, and feta.
Oh,
So the reason I want to talk about this is because roasting and using vegetables on a sheet pan, I think everybody probably has
right.
experienced that. And then even go into a tomato, like soft tomatoes, small tomatoes, that's fine. But let's talk about sheet pan eggs. And we're talking about feta like slices, like cubes
Like
of
blocks. Yeah.
feta, right. So,
Yeah.
walk us through this recipe and tell us a little bit about the experience of using the eggs and the feta together on this sheet pan meal.
Definitely. So, like you were saying, you know, roasting tomatoes and asparagus, not anything new. It's a really quick way to cook them and they get, you know, nice and blistered. But what I love is the feta becomes really soft and almost spreadable. It's like goat cheese. So it comes and it still has its tang, but it's really, I mean, just spreadable, which is lovely. But then also the eggs, like, the whites end up firming, but the yolks stay runny. So it becomes like a built-in sauce. So when you break into it, it kind of goes over everything. So you're really getting so much flavor, so much depth and richness, but you're not really doing a ton. And so this is I write in the book, this is a recipe I've been making since my 20s because it's just so easy. It's so satisfying. It's colorful. You can eat it with some bread or not, but you're really getting all these different textures and flavors and some good vegetables in there again in 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah,
So
and that's done at 400. I didn't check. That's done at 400 degrees.
of course.
Yeah, amazing. Yes. Yeah, very good. Tell us, there's another one. Now, this is in the lap dinners also, and I thought it was a unique way to do this. Quickie tomato pasta soup
Yeah.
using the tube of tomato
Okay.
paste.
Yeah, so this was actually an accidental recipe because I had something else in mind and it wasn't intending to be a soup, but then it ended up being. So tomato paste, you know, which is really concentrated cooked down tomatoes, is a great way to make a fast impromptu sauce. So you will cook the tomato paste, you know, get some contact with the pan so it gets color, and then you add water, and then together that will form your tomato sauce. So it might not have the rich depth of like a 2 hour, 4 hour cooked sauce. But when you're cooking something fast, it is delicious. And you can add some grated cheese, which will also thicken it and give it a ton of flavor and a bit of saltiness. So you don't want to add too much salt. And then you add some pasta and a bit of arugula, and you have this like soup, like pasta hybrid, and it's really satisfying and warm. And again, you have some vegetables, some texture. Yeah. And so I really love that as well. It's really great for tired nights when you want a quick warming dinner.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. Because I was thinking, oh, tomato soup. I thought, okay, we automate. Like, I wonder what's in this. Is it like canned tomato or is it
Right.
like fresh tomato? Do I have to use a blender? Then I'm
Right.
like, oh my gosh, it's a little tube of tomato paste. All right,
Exactly.
one more that sounded really good and super flavorful is the baked whitefish with citrusy olive and herb topping. Again, this is at the dinner table.
At the dinner. Yeah. No, this one is delicious. And I just think the flavors of citrus and the spices and the olives, like you get some salty brininess, you get refreshing citrus, and then a bit of paprika is on there as well, right? And then it's just so flavorful and so colorful. And it's one of these dishes you can serve to company, but really you didn't do very much. Like it's so easy.
And you topped it with smoked paprika, cilantro, and mint.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. So
wonderful.
different. Yeah. So definitely inspired by my time in Spain, a lot more.
Yeah, but you can buy chunks of cod or some kind of a firm whitefish really easily. It's readily available and
or frozen. Exactly.
100%. And keeping it in the freezer and thawing it out is not. It's like a no-brainer. My little tool that I use to thaw things. This kind of has a story related to my mom, but we have a big family, and every year, my mom, when she was in her late 80s, every year for Christmas, rather than like trying to get everybody like an individual, like, gift, she kind of got us all the same thing. And it was these little thawing trays that she bought. So it looks like a kind of like a little cutting board, but it has it's has a dip in it. And then on top, it's an aluminum tray, and you can lay the frozen fish or shrimp or scallops or steak or whatever right on top of this thawing tray, and it moves the heat from the air through it, and I mean, it thaws it so fast.
That's so smart.
It is. I know, so I'll have to link to one in the show notes because and I've given it as gifts now to some of my friends because I know that like they cook and they're like, I always don't know, like, I don't want to thaw it in the microwave and I want it to be safe. But and water, but it is amazing to use this little thawing tray. And I was thinking about that with this recipe, and I love the onions and the olives and the mint and the cilantro. It looks really good. And as you do, done at 400 degrees, we don't have to worry about the oven temperature, and it's just a matter of the timing. But that one's done on a sheet pan. I thought that one looked really good as well.
No, and frozen fish is so good. And there's such good quality frozen fish and scallops that now just having that there is such a great thing for a weeknight. Yeah.
So I understand that in a couple weeks you're coming back to New York for something. So tell everybody what that is that you're coming back for. Maybe they can tune in and watch you on YouTube if they're not able to catch it live.
Yeah. So I'm coming back on the 27th for the Today Show. So I'll be on the 8 a.m. hour. Probably closer to like 9:30, 9:40, but I'll know later. But yes, you can definitely watch on YouTube. I'm making a couple of recipes from the book. So I would love if you joined in. That would be really nice.
Yeah, and when they do that, tell everybody a little bit about like when you step on to actually do the cooking, do they have different things like prep to different stages, or how does that work when you're doing it on Today?
Yeah, it's definitely more TV cooking. So there are things that will kind of prep and show the steps, but then the final thing has already been made at the end. So we're not always cooking it ahead of time. So I think I'm making meatballs this time. So they'll be sort of shaped and done ahead. And then the host will have the finished ones to try and sample because there's not enough time to cook. But it is kind of more talking about the process and showing it, but definitely more TV magic than real cooking.
Yeah.
For the most part.
And people can get your recipes online if they don't have your book at the New York Times. And where else? What other outlets did you say that you're actually writing and creating recipes for?
There's a lot, and the Kitchn. There's a bunch there as well. But if you go to my website, it'll link to all the recipes you can find, like the Guardian and places like that. And I think the New York Times is the only one that has a paywall as well. But but
you can get they have good. You can look around, and if you're a new subscriber, or if you and if nothing, you have to get the Wordle. I mean, Wordle is like on the New York Times app, and So you can say, okay, maybe for just a little bit more, you can access the news and
And they have
the
good deals.
recipes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I usually post a gift link on my Instagram and stories. Like when a new recipe comes, I'll post a gift link.
Oh yeah. So
And
follow,
I,
yeah. And where
yeah,
can people connect with you on Instagram? What is your handle for that?
it's just my full name, so it's Yasmin Fahr at Yasmin Fahr.
Great.
I was gonna say my Gmail, but yeah.
Yeah. And what about your Substack newsletter?
It's called Cooking from Afar, so it's like a play off of my last name of Fahr.
Oh, nice. Nice. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's been wonderful to connect with you, talk to you
Yeah.
about your food, your recipes, your cooking philosophy, your philosophy about life. And I encourage everyone to look up Cook Simply, Live Fully, and tune into the Today Show. If you can't catch it live, they always put the replays on YouTube, so you can watch Yasmin there as well.
Oh, thank you so much for having
Okay,
me.
and I forgot one question I forgot to
Oh
ask,
yeah.
and I'm gonna ask you, because we talked about it before we started. I love to talk about cookbooks, obviously, but if there is a favorite cookbook that you have that has influenced you and really been one of your favorites, I'd love for you to share that.
Yeah, so there's this book called Science in the Kitchen and the Art of Eating Well by Pellegrino Artusi, and it was written in the 1890s. And I love cookbooks. I collect them, and I really love reading older ones just to see how people cooked, what ingredients they use, and you learn a lot about the place and time and the way head notes are written. And so I found this book, I think, when I was in graduate school at NYU for food studies, and I have like a really old, tattered, beaten copy, but it's just so much fun to read. And so it's I haven't actually made anything from it. I think it's more of like a historical cookbook, but you might be able to, I mean, there actually aren't any, I think there aren't ingredient amounts, like it's much more casual,
Yeah.
but then that style is so fun to read. And it's like
Yes.
what you assume the reader already knows, where I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
nice progression of recipes, or I
Yeah.
find
Yeah.
that interesting.
Yeah. So I'll definitely link to that in the show notes, and I appreciate you sharing that. We'll have
Yeah.
safe travels to New York.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your summer. Thanks again for coming on the show. And again, best of luck with everything related to your books
Thank you
and
so
your
much.
career in food writing.
Oh, thank you. Have a great rest of the summer too.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green. And until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.